like no one's path is completely like smooth. I mean, there's a playbook and then there's reality.
Yo, so what's up? We're talking this week about churn and expansion, which is, I guess, a thing that lots of SaaS companies talk about, and specifically, I guess, how it's changed for us. So this is something I always talk about internally. I'm not sure how often it lands, but like churn and expansion is a function of customer numbers, right, or current customers, whereas new business isn't. And one of the challenges is, as you get bigger, your 1% churn on a massive amount of customers has a much bigger impact than 1% churn on a small amount of customers. Now, obviously, that is obvious, but your new business probably isn't going to catch up, right? It's not going to be you're growing your new business, but after a time, the churn and the expansion numbers become really, really significant, and we've certainly seen that. Like, when we first started, we were having, like any company having a bit of churn and a bit of expansion. I mean, we've been quite lucky. Luck, is it luck? I don't know. But we've been lucky in the fact that we have net negative revenue churn, or at least we have for most of our life, other than a couple of months over the initial COVID period. So it's always been something that we kind of relied on that to an extent, and probably didn't put as much effort into it in the early days as we could have done, and put most of our effort into new business. Now, obviously, that's still new business is obviously really, really important. You can't just exist forever on expansion, hoping that your expansion is going to be bigger than churn. But certainly for us, what we've found is the churn and expansion numbers are huge compared to the new business, right? Like, we're still managing it that we're getting more expansion than we are churn, but it starts to become really, really significant. And as I said, like when you get to the size that we are, I mean, we're not obviously, Salesforce or anything, but we've got 9,000 customers. A small kind of change in that group of customers can have a big impact on your bottom line. So we decided about a year ago, I suppose, probably about a year ago, that we probably needed to think about things differently. And traditionally, we'd been managing. We put all of our effort into new business and customer support. Those were our two big areas, and that seemed to work really well. But what we were realizing is that the kind of, the nurturing of those customers was falling a little bit through the cracks. Now, the very big customers, obviously, we were managing that, and that was often led by Mark and Sam, who's within the team. But we realized as we got bigger, we had to firstly put some more automation in, but secondly, we had to deal with those mid-tier customers and also deal with it in a bit more of a kind of organized way, how we were going to manage these bigger customers and how we were going to expand it. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And I'm guessing, I don't know what you think, Mark, but like when we first started, I don't remember really thinking about how we were going to deal with expansion when we got to 9,000 customers. For me, it was always about new business, and I guess that might have been because of our background in agency land, where you would do a piece of work and then you'd get invoiced for the piece of work, and then you'd be on it would always be on a kind of treadmill to try and find the new customers. But obviously, with subscription businesses, it's a lot different because you keep those customers for a lot longer.
Yeah, well, I think there's several things. If you think of the profile of our early customers, some of those customers are very small ticket, right? Like, $40 a month. You don't really build customer success for them. What you do is this is right at the very early days. I mean, to be honest, for $40, you probably want like very light touch with anyone. But in the early days, you speak with everyone. $20, $40, whoever they are, you speak to them. I spoke with most of them in the first year or two. And obviously they weren't all $40. Some were a bit bigger, but they weren't huge customers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be honest, with those people, the best thing you can do is do like a really good new business effort, as in help them get set up, get them going, give them the demos, effectively train them, and then set them on their way. And then if they need any help, then you have your support team to kind of to help them along that journey. But there isn't an obvious, like, it's not an obvious thing to try to go back and go, oh, I wonder if I could turn that $40 into $60 with an hour-long phone call. Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? So I think that the initial profile of the SMB customers meant that there wasn't really any point in doing this. Now, then the bigger ones did start to come along, and that sort of, again, was kind of being handled within, I mean, to say it's like our initial sales team wasn't a classic sales team. It was sort of myself and then people we were training up. But we would handle both new business and existing relationships. So it was kind of a sales and account management team, just when it was very, very small. Now, like, obviously, if you're designing a sales team, that's not what you would design right now, like, at all. But we didn't have like extensive budget for building something out. And we had a support team who were very, very good at, like, also doing that kind of stuff as well, that kind of relationship stuff.
Yeah, I suppose there is that kind of challenge of, like, at what point, it's the same thing as, like, at what point should you hire your VP of sales or your, a senior salesperson, but also at what point do you start to split these things out? Because I think what we found, there was a moment, I think it was probably about a year ago, maybe a bit over a year ago, where we realized that, I can't even remember who it was, but there was quite a big customer churn and nobody knew it was coming, and nobody had spoken to them for 6 months. And we just realized, hang on, we just haven't quite got a process in place for this. We've got the sales team were incentivized at that point to both in terms of new business and expansion. But inevitably they were stretched quite thin, and they were focusing more on new business, which is, right. And so, it was almost like, it was a kind of a bit of a wake up call. Like, maybe we do need to have a bit more process and actually, separate the team. And I think that sort of phase one of that, for us at least, just if people are interested, is that we did then say, okay, we're going to streamline this a little bit. So the sales team are now just going to focus on new business, and we're going to create a professional services team out of the people that we've got already, and then start to build that up. That was kind of almost phase one. And then I guess phase two is we've recently hired a VP of customer success. There was another phase two. We started to create what we're changing the names around a bit now, but like an account management team for mid-tier as well. So we had the professional services team. We're going to take care of the kind of the enterprise clients, and then the mid-tier clients were going to be the account management team, and then the very small ones were going to be handled through support. Yeah. And I think that made a big difference. I think, it's unfortunate that sort of COVID came in the middle of this, but actually, we've actually seen, certainly for our larger companies as well, like, continued expansion. Obviously the smaller customers are a bit more flaky up and down, sort of, they tend to churn more frequently and kind of add screens and take away screens and things like that. But we found that looking at the large companies, they have consistently grown, even actually through the sort of, as I say, for us, the first couple of months of COVID hit us quite hard. But actually, when I looked at the kind of larger cohorts, they flattened out slightly, but they didn't go backwards. They continue to grow, continue to expand despite everything, albeit a sort of, a kind of less steep trajectory. But I think generally, two things. One, it kind of changed our mindset internally, as kind of culturally, is like, oh, okay, that it was almost like, kind of like, oh, look, we're getting expansion, isn't that great, kind of thing. I'm sort of saying it's quite as simple as that, but we were kind of, it just kind of happened, if you like. And obviously we were helping it along the way. And as you say, we had really smart people in customer support who were also kind of really understood the product and had a kind of instinct there around customers and how they could expand customers. But I think actually separating out those teams and saying, okay, like, well, your responsibility is specifically to move the needle in terms of our expansion and churn for these different cohorts. And I think, obviously, going forward, looking over at the next year, expansion and churn is going to become even more important as we get bigger. And again, for me, I suppose it's something I hadn't quite realized early on, is just how just how significant it becomes. Because, as you say, like the new business as a percentage of overall revenue in the early days is really high, right? If you're in month 3, and it's why I think it's partly why people grow so quickly in the early days as well, because you've got virtually no churn because everyone's new. And even if you did have churn, 1% of 100 customers is quite small when you're adding 20 customers a month kind of thing. But obviously, when you get to 9,000 customers, 1% of that, I'm not saying that we don't churn at 1% a month, but 1% of that obviously is 900 customers, and adding a new 900 customers a month is a lot heavier going kind of thing. And I hadn't.
Is that right?
Sorry, 90. Yeah.
No, I was like, shit, that's bad. I was like 900 customers walk out the door. Bye.
No, I mean, we don't. I mean, as I say, for the larger cohort, it's about 2% a year actually churn. So it's tiny. For the smaller cohort, it's higher for sure. But so 90 customers versus, if we've said at the beginning, let's say you're adding 20 and you're losing 1, that kind of you can see that 1 to 20 ratio. It's hard to maintain that when you're losing, say, 90 customers, and you have to suddenly you have to add 1,800 or something to kind of to get the same kind of trajectory. So it is a massive challenge, and you can see, I guess, once you get to the size of, once you start to plateau a little bit as well, or you've reached sort of market saturation, then I guess it's all about expansion and reducing churn.
I'd add some flavor on it because I think, to be honest, you shouldn't really be getting into a position where you have that many customers and you don't really have a fleshed out success team, right? That would just be a bad advice. Where I think there is some nuance in terms of our journey is, I think you also got to look at what you're actually selling. Now, people kind of go, wow, your expansion ratios in the first year are just incredible, right? It's like four times expansion on average. Now, you're doing that without a customer success team. How do you do that? Well, basically, this is just how it works, right? So new customers for ScreenCloud, right? You think of it, it's screens on walls. You have to technically, those screens may exist or they may not exist. So they may need installation and They need hardware to be put into them. They need to be configured locally, and then they need to be pulled into your account and then have content deployed to them. Now, up front, you've got to learn all of this. And often, it's the customer will say, well, look, I'll just do it in my location just to begin with, right? In the trial and maybe in the early stages, and get the content right, get some feedback on it, But typically, people that use ScreenCloud, they're rolling it out to multiple locations where the original buyer might not be actually in themselves. So just rolling out screens for the customer is in itself is quite a big project, right? So if you're doing 100 screens in 10 locations, this is going to take time. Especially if those screens don't exist right now, you've got to, as I said, you've got to go through those steps. So to a degree, the expansion that happens over the first year, I think those seeds are laid out in onboarding, which is the sales part, right? So you sell, onboard, train, help them with hardware, help them with content. And then to a degree, you've got to kind of let them get on with it, right? Because they're like, okay, I've got this now. I understand. They go through the first cycle. They ask you millions of questions and stuff like that. And then once they're like, okay, I've done my first 10 screens, I'm happy with that. Right, I'm going to roll out to another 100, and I'm going to do it over the next 6 to 9 months. To a degree, does that person really need 3 months later someone going, hey, let's talk about your account? It's like, yeah, I know. I'm midway through my rollout. It's going really well. Hey, should we talk about... So there's a point where it's kind of like you've already done your expansion by doing a disproportionately heavy sales effort and onboarding effort. And what we found in the early days as well, now it gets more nuanced the bigger the customers get and things like that. But what we found in the early days was put as much effort into that first 3 months, which is effectively from the trial through to them converting, and then getting them really moving afterwards, and just be super available then. And you kind of have bought yourself this first year. Now, what we weren't doing very well, clearly, was like, all right, what happens after first year when you get back in touch? What happens when it's like 2 years in? We didn't really have that sort of in place. And the other issue, of course, which regular listeners will know, is that we rebuilt our platform. So it's like, do you want to really, I mean, it was hard for us to put in a whole load of expansion effort on features that you couldn't use for 2 years. So because the old platform stayed still, it didn't have any development done to it. So like, again, we could have done better and stuff like that, but we disproportionately put all of our money into engineering so that we could get this new platform built and pushed out. So we just sort of muddled along as best we could, and we started along with it. So it's not, I wouldn't design it that way, but then I would never design for a complete platform rebuild in year 3. That would be something I would genuinely avoid.
How do we know? Actually, I think one of the things that we're going to see differently this year is we probably won't see as much expansion, to be honest, because we're selling it in a different way now. So you're right. Like what we would typically find in the old days is if you look at the sort of highest paying cohort, in month 1, only 60% of them were in that cohort to start with. So they emerged into that cohort over a period of time because, to start with, they might only have a couple of screens or, a handful of screens, and they were kind of getting things set up. But the way we're selling things now is we're selling it more, rather than sort of selling things by units, we're selling more tiers of service. So what we would generally do now is basically people would buy a package, and they might not use all the screens on day 1, but they're still paying for those licenses. So it's a slightly different approach, and I think it's good for, it's certainly a much better way for us to sell, because we're selling on value rather than units. And we're also, I guess there's an incentive as well then for people, if they pay for these licenses, to actually start using them as quickly as possible, with our help as well. So obviously we're kind of there to help people. But in many ways you could look at expansion as not expansion, but just onboarding. And actually, at month 6, that's when you start counting, maybe. But it's. For us, it's really exciting now. We've hired this new VP of customer success, because she's just talking, she's talking in a language that it's not completely new, but she's really thinking about looking at cohorts of customers, cohorts within cohorts, and understanding health scores and things like that. Like what's the predictor of good behavior? What are the kind of early warning signs and all those sorts of things, which, again, when you're smaller, you can do that because you've got a little, you just got more of a handle over your customers. But when you get into the thousands of customers, it starts to become a bit more of a kind of data project. Like, what can the data tell us that's predicting? What are the leading indicators rather than the sort of lagging indicators that we've generally tended to look at?
And that's another problem with doing a full rebuild, is you have to redo all your data. So,
oh man.
Yeah. So don't rebuild, basically, is a really good, it sets you back. It sets you back a long way doing it. But, we've done it, and it was the right decision. It causes chaos around a lot of these things, because suddenly you've got a brand new platform, and then you've got to go back and then add all of your data triggers and things like that. So, time ticks on by, as it has a tendency to do, and you find yourself in this kind of strange position where you're like a Series B company with a seed level understanding of what's going on.
It's quite, so just to so within the company, we have one of our Slack channels is automated churn. So anyone that churns, we see it in the Slack channel, and then it flags it specifically if it's over a certain number. But at the moment, because we're migrating people from one platform to the other, unfortunately, the way it's set up is that it triggers a churn. So your heart, I mean, now I'm getting used to it, but to start with, you kind of go, oh my God, we've had 10 people churning on massive screen. It's like, no, don't worry, it's migration to the new platform.
Yeah, it's a quirk of billing, unfortunately. And what we're doing there, I mean, we're not incompetent. Don't worry, like we wouldn't design it this way.
Yeah.
Just in case you're thinking, well, I'm listening to these fools. But they were also, as part of doing the new platform, we're like getting into a whole load of stuff about regions and where data lives, which is becoming increasingly important. Obviously, on version 1, data lives fucking together, right? Like it's like you build one app and it's hosted there. But now, you can have, EU regions, US regions, and then probably in the future, I'm sure we'll add more regions. But for now, we have EU and US, and we want to bill the US customers through our US company, doing it all. I mean, it really all comes back to like a lot of work around finance, billing, data. I mean, stuff which, frankly, in 2015, 2016, when you're doing your MVP, you should not be worried about. But it comes home to roost, right? Like, and so, moving people into those different regions and those different, literally being billed by different legal entities means that your original subscription contract under one legal entity kind of needs to end and a new one needs to begin, hence a churn and hence a reactivation or new customer. But obviously that makes your data look insane. You can clean it, but it doesn't. Yeah. As you say, like you get the heart attack thing when suddenly you have 3 massive churns and then you look at it and you see account customer success or support going US migration. You're like, all right.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Cause I mean,
obviously it's going to get worse, right? We still got about 8,000 to go.
And obviously, one of the things that we look at, like I guess most companies, is the quick SaaS ratio, which is the ratio between new and expansion and churn and contraction. And the magic number there is 4. So it should be for every $1 you contract or churn, you expand or add new customers by $4. But it also means that even if you're netting or if someone's churning and then immediately becoming a customer, so you net 1 for 1, that screws things up, right? Because there's a ratio of 1 to 1 rather than 1 to 4. So again, we've had to we're having to do a little bit of going back over the data and just eliminating what we call fake churn and making sure that it's kind of clearly not included in the churn numbers and therefore affecting our quick SaaS ratio. But or I guess all fun and games of a scale-up business. And especially, as you say, like, moving from, I mean, let's face it, when we first started ScreenCloud, I guess we assumed that it was going to be more SMB and actually it would be lighter touch.
That's what we built. We were building a mass market product, right, for small businesses. That was the actual goal. And obviously in the world, but back then you're trying to live, right? You're trying to just succeed and not die, right? It's you're not worrying about any of these things. And the assumption, which was wrong, but I think is still a fair assumption, was that because we only wanted to do a software component only, we didn't want to be doing consultancy projects. We didn't want to be doing installation. We didn't want to be selling hardware. We only wanted to do a certain part of the whole thing that you need to do to have successful screens. And we just figured that the people who would be all right with that would most likely be the small companies, because they would just go and buy their own TV, plug in their own device, set it up themselves, and then use your software, like nice, easy to buy, free trial, transparent pricing, bada like that stuff. And we succeeded. I mean, we totally nailed it. But then what we hadn't anticipated was that there would be these much larger customers who would also be looking for vendors in a similar way. Yeah. And then at that point we were like, okay, well, we really haven't built it for this. And so that's why the rebuild obviously had to happen. So that's kind of what sets a lot of this back, because like, what's the point building out a world-class success team when you haven't even got the product that you want to actually succeed on? So you kind of, it's a bit chicken and egg with all of this stuff. Like if it was the better play would have been to anticipate that and then to sort of build a platform with that in mind.
Yeah.
And had we done so, then yes, we would have. But then
also
would the beginning have gone as well? Because
we would have. I think we would have had to have raised a lot more money. That's for sure. Because
because it takes a hell of a lot more time and energy to do it this way, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, the thing is, like, no one's path is completely like smooth. I mean, there's a playbook and then there's reality.
Yeah.
I mean, all I'd say is, like, you know, like, because sometimes how this may come across as like quite naive, and to a degree there's naivety elements in here, but then there's also the simple fact that, like, the revenue that we've got to from where we started, you know, something like 0.04% of startups achieve that. Right, so you are literally, you know, you're the the analogy I was going to use is probably a bit inappropriate, so I'll pull back.
Something to do with COVID, or I don't know. Yeah.
No, I was not going to say you are the sperm that got to the egg. Like, I mean, like, you know, on those kind of odds, maybe not that.
That could be our strap line. The sperm that got to the egg. ScreenCloud.
But like,
in our investor deck.
Yeah. You know, if you're really early stage, I still think the right advice is survive and get it, and just get to it. Like, start selling it, get it out there. You know, I think if you were thinking, but what if we become an enterprise play as well? Like, I don't know. What if you become nothing?
I know. And it's a similar sort of thing, as I said earlier, about, like, you know, the advice you get about when to hire VP of sales, when to hire VP of customer success. And the advice is generally, don't hire a VP to help you work. Don't hire a VP to get them to work out how to do it, kind of thing. The founders need to kind of figure it out first. Like, who is our ICP? Who is, you know, how do customers expand? Why do they expand? Why do they churn? You know, so really, I think that, the advice is, like, make sure you properly get your head into it and understand it. And then you bring a VP in to go, right, this is how it works. And obviously, there's more work to be done. But this is, you know, we're not kind of sitting here going, geez, we just don't really know what to do about our expansion or a churn. I know, let's just go and hire someone and get them to kind of figure it out for us. That's generally not the advice.
No. Yeah.
And actually, our investors were, I mean, you know, I said to Dave, our VP of sales, I said, like, our investors were kind of saying to us, like, we're not sure you're ready to hire a VP of sales yet because you haven't worked out X, Y, Z. And it's you know, it is worth listening to that, I think. It's just like, you know, the founders have to do a lot of the initial work to really kind of get their heads into it. And you can't expect someone to come in and do that for you. But at the same time, there is also that balance of, like, but as you're getting bigger and churn is becoming more and more significant, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to, you can't just leave it to chance, because after a while, it's, you know, making a 0.1% change in your churn rate is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in ARR. So it's it's an interesting balance. But
well, we will see if you know, now we've set things up. We have four teams now in success, from very, very from that. So we've got quite a lot more going on there. So and we have a full data project which is underway and about to be first bit delivered. So we're going from sort of zero to hero a bit, at least in terms of the way that's structured and how it's doing. I guess let's revisit this in 6 months' time and see how much impact that's had.
Yeah, for sure. Lots to do. Cool. Okay, well,
right.
That's us. Hopefully that was useful, interesting, illuminating. And see you next time.
Bye.